Hello and welcome back to another Cultist Astronaut video. Today we're going to be looking at some changes that were made to the editor, especially around the tile editor. So let's load up a world. I'm going to use this test world, which has been pretty useful. There has been some improvements for entity selection. We can actually click on characters now, which was something we couldn't do before. And also the gizmo will grow in size if it's selected, which makes it easier to actually click and move. There is some stuff to improve with the character movement. The body, or the physics body, doesn't actually move to the new location. But that's something we can do. We do have the sorting layer and order exposed, which means that I can put this character in front of or behind the background or the foreground. This also works for other entities that are not characters. So every entity in our game has a sorting layer and a sorting order. And all entities in our game are visual in some aspect. Yep, and I can switch between objects as well. And I'll show a more dense scene because there's also some improvements around entity selection that I can illustrate with a denser scene that has layered objects. Right now, the only two things that are clickable here, or the only things that are clickable here, are these two objects. I can't click anything else but these two guys. Yeah, and if I want to edit a tile, we now have a new button here on the world browser. Next to each tile map, you can see we have an edit button. And using ImGui, I was able to calculate the position of this edit button by taking the width and the width of this button, as well as some padding. So everything's like very mathematical in ImGui, which is nice. It's more intuitive. But yeah, I can like edit the ground. So when I click edit, it actually opens up the tile editor. It also turns on a grid. So we're getting to the point where we have to make this window bigger. And I'm looking into that. Basically, I need to do some stuff with Win32 and DirectX in order to resize our view. But for now, just to focus on tile editing, I decided to save that for another day. So we do have a very limited like screen real estate. We can improve that by collapsing these windows. So that's nice. But yeah, with the tile editor, when it switches to this mode, it turns on the grid, and you can also see which tile that I'm highlighting with the box on the cursor. And up here, you'll see that we're on the current mode brush. And then I can pick a tile like this one, which is what we're using here, and I can paint it in. Before, I was only able to click and place one at a time, but now we can click and hold and drag, which is much smoother and nicer. Unlike Unity, there is no erase tool that you have to click. You actually just hold down the right mouse button. And I just feel like that's more intuitive. So click to place, right click to erase. And I can do that on existing tiles as well. So anything on the ground layer, which you can see here, I'm on the ground tile map. So anything that's visible here I can erase. And if I want to, I can switch to another one. These kind of have the same names right now, but this is the trim. And I can erase the trim if I want to, or I can put it back. So that's nice. So that's the brush tool. We also have a rectangular tool, which is really cool. This is inspired by Unity. It works similar to the brush here, where the left mouse button is place, except you click and hold to determine the start point, and then you drag and it expands the square, which makes it really easy to paint in stuff. And just like the brush tool, if I hold down the right mouse button instead, it actually makes a red box, which shows me what it's going to delete. And if I go back to this ground layer, you'll see I can actually erase these things pretty quickly. Unfortunately, I don't have undo redo yet. That's something on the list to add. But we're at a point now where that's extremely useful. Another cool thing is you can actually change the tint. So right here you'll see we can actually click on this and it opens up a color wheel. And I can change the color of this trim. So that's very useful. And yeah, this is all being rendered inside of the ImGui widget. So I had to do some research to figure out how to do this, but basically ImGui exposes a draw list that you can call into to render textures. I'll show a little bit of that code in a bit. But yeah, this is actually basically a custom widget that I've made. And it renders every single tile that this level uses. One problem with this approach is, or with the current layout, is it's hard to like understand the structure of things. So like all these tiles right here are a bridge, and I don't have a bridge in this scene, but basically if you configure these in the correct shape, it will form a bridge. But since this is just being dumped out in a linear fashion, it's really hard to tell what it is I'm looking at. So the next step for the tile editor is to make it so that we can configure this, so we can look at shapes. That might mean that this has to be a little bigger or has a zoom in and zoom out feature instead of a scroll. So like right here we pan and we have zoom. We would essentially do something very similar here where we have a scroll, like a zoomable, panable view, and then we can draw shapes or configure essentially like prefabricated tile layouts. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. So instead of this mess, you would see a bridge, and you could like click and drag to select a range, and then you can like paint that in, right? Right now I can't select multiple tiles from here and paint in multiple tiles here, right? We're limited to the brush and rectangle, but those are some of the things we're going to be looking into as an update. But yeah, the scrolling is working really nice, and this is a separate widget, so you could technically render this in any window with my function call. So yeah, that's the tile editor. We'll take a look at the code in a little bit. We're going to open up the other scene to kind of show off some of the new entity selection code. So let's open up Xcoria. And let's see what we can do here. So entities are layered typically. So the objects you see in the background, those are separate sprite entities, and they all have their own sorting layer. So if I just click, and I'm still in the tile editor, so we want to close this. So now I'm in normal mode, and if I click, you'll see this actually selects, actually can't see the box, which is kind of concerning, but let's see, might be a bug I have here. Let me close this and reopen it and see. Not sure if I tested this completely when I added the new tile editor stuff. Let's see what this does. Okay, so I have a bug where it doesn't show me my box, but yeah, when I click and select, you'll see it's picking up on these objects. And if I want to, it's like I could select this. Oops, let's see here. I can select this, but if I want to select the thing behind it, I can keep clicking, and you'll see it basically goes through in order from the highest to the lowest, the object I'm clicking on. So if I keep clicking, it actually will start over and then cycle through. So that's pretty useful. And if I hit escape and then click again, it always picks the object that's closest to the user's view. We can also click on sensors. So this door has a sensor entity. And you'll see it exposes more data about this entity, which this entity has a teleporter. And it tells me which ID it's connected to and which room ID that it belongs to, right? So this says that it's linked to 34. I happen to know that 34 is over here. You can see it says 34. And this one says it's linked to 29. If I click over here, you'll see it says 29. And I can change this manually. In the future, this might be like a drop down or some way to like drag and drop a specific teleporter in, but for now, what we can do is we can actually select the teleporter, click link, and what this does is this turns on selection mode, and you can see we can actually select the teleporter here. And that's a quick way of linking the two doors together. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. It's really nice to be able to see these different settings and actually change them. I can put this crate in the foreground, the background, etc. And what's really cool is I can save all of this to disk. So if I do save, you can see that was extremely fast. And if I go to fork, you'll see here that it actually updated the positions of my objects. So you'll see these all changed. Some of them are very minor changes. You can see I changed the sorting layer. So since the world files are in a human readable text format and everything saves in the correct order, it's actually very easy to do a diff and to see like what actually changed. It looks like I saved the test world, but there was no changes there. So probably just like some end of file or new line stuff that it added. Carriage return or something. There's some weird symbols that don't show up here that are considered a change. Okay, so let's take a little look at the code that I wrote for rendering the tile editor. So in ImGui classic fashion here, we have to do a begin, and then there's a corresponding end at the very bottom. And then up here, I create this toolbar which has my brush and rectangle buttons, which we saw at the top of the window. And then I print out some information about the selected room and tile map. Rooms can have multiple tile maps, so that's why we show both. And then this is the color field that I added. This is what opens up the color wheel for the tint. And then this is what I was talking about. So ImGui allows you to grab the draw list for the window you're in. And so this is going to be tied to this begin that we see here. And this gives me a pointer to a draw list. And then I can use the draw list to do things like, hey, here's a clip region. Basically, only render inside of this rectangle. And this is important because when we render with the draw list, it doesn't respect the bounds of our child, which I'll talk about in a second. So if I render this, it actually renders outside of the child window, and it bleeds over into these fields. So we use a clip rectangle to basically hide anything that should be, you know, if it's outside of this region, then it's not rendered essentially. And this tile map is very big and we need to scroll through it, so a clip region helps us mask that essentially. So yeah, we have this begin child, so this is like a sub window or a sub element of our tile editor window. And like I mentioned, all this code here could be tucked into a function for the tile editor, and we could use this in other windows essentially. So yeah, that's what we're doing with the draw list for the clip rectangle. Here's some setup functions. We need to basically calculate the size of this thing. I have some constants that I'm using. These may be moved up. There's some refactoring here that I can do to clean this up, but for now they're just put here. Basically, I want to have an 8-column display for my tile maps. This will probably change as we improve the functionality, but this was a quick way to get it up and running. And then this is the tile size in pixels. So every tile in the game world is 1 by 1, which, you know, 1 unit by 1 unit. But when we render to the screen, we have to work in pixels. So basically 50 pixels by 50 pixels is how big each tile is on our display. And we actually use this down below to calculate the tile map size, but also to figure out how big our images should be. So using the draw list, we're able to add a bunch of textures to the draw list. All the textures are uploaded separately using DirectX. And then ImGui has a backend for DirectX, which is capable of communicating with these textures. And so there's this IM texture ID, which basically is ImGui's version of what DirectX is using. And so we take the DirectX handle and we cast it to this, and then it knows which texture to essentially set when it renders it. This is the code I'm using for the grid. So basically this is rendered to the screen space. So we had to essentially calculate these positions based on where the tile map is located. So you'll see there's a bunch of those in there. And this was calculated up here relative to the window position. So one thing we have to do is we have to make dummy objects. Since we're using the draw list by itself doesn't know anything about layout or scroll views. So we use this dummy object to essentially fill the window as if the tile map was accounting for scroll and size and all of that. So this is a fake object that basically just covers that same space. And then this is our cursor math. Basically, we take the mouse position on screen and we have to convert it to a local coordinate that we can then map to a tile index. So this is how we do selection. And if we're within range and we're hovering over it, we render a rectangle that has a thickness of 4. So that's that thicker square that we have that shows us which one we're hovering over. And then, of course, we can click to select. And then, just like with the begin, we have to pop the clip rectangle and we have to end the child. And that's essentially how we create our tile map editor. But yeah, that's my update for today. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Have a wonderful day. See you in the next video.